Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a good hiatus. I know I enjoyed the holidays, and welcome to a new year with the show being back. And you know, today, no recap. We're going to do it while we review. So this episode was basically two plot lines running simultaneously that converged at the end of it. For simplicity's sakes, let's go over the storylines separately instead of jumping back and forth between them. The first storyline involves Sam captured by Chuck with Eileen. He'll be Eileen today. Basically having a conversation with poor Eileen, forced to do things she doesn't want to, like stab Sam a couple of times. Eventually, Chuck gives him a pocket watch that allows the two to travel through time and see what the future will hold in season 16 after Chuck is caged up. This whole deal was pretty solid and by far the standout of this episode. Hence why I'm starting with it, as I don't have much to say about it. Eileen did a good job acting like an unwilling puppet, though I wonder about the actual procedure, because previously in the season, it heavily implied that Sam and Chuck's wounds were connected, so if you did something to one of them, the other would feel it. Thus, shouldn't Chuck have felt the pain of cutting into Sam? And that's originally what I thought his reason for hesitating was, but then they had to do this whole you don't get your hands dirty character rant that doesn't quite fit in the lore. But then, what does about Chuck this season? Then, at the end, when they reveal that Sam's wound gets fully healed once he gives up hope, I didn't get that. I'm not sure how much hope you can quantify Sam as having earlier that season. How exactly did that fit into keeping the wound from healing? The whole bit made no sense to me. Why did Chuck need Eileen to spy on the guys? Yes, I stand corrected. He really couldn't see Sam and Dean, but Sam's wound gave him insight into Chuck. So why doesn't it give Chuck insight into Sam? And why would a wound on Sam keep Chuck from seeing Dean or seeing things through Dean's eyes? This whole bit just makes no sense. I did like the pocket watch prop that Chuck gave to Sam to examine the future timelines. It was pretty well done up until the end of it, where we learn that Sam and Dean become vampires. Well, mostly my problem with that was the fact that Jensen decided that the vamp teeth gave him the ability to chew the scenery more than he did Jody. I really want to ask what happened here. It's like all the other acting in the episode that Jensen did just used up his talent and he had nothing left and just went full ham there at the end. It made me laugh. The whole ending bugs me just a little bit. Back in episode 307, Fresh Blood, Gordon was turned into a vampire and killed other vampires. Likewise, Dean was turned back in episode 605, Live Free or Twi Hard, and he managed to kill an entire nest on his own. Becoming vampires wouldn't keep Sam and Dean from hunting things, and this is also assuming that they can't get to the vampire cure, which the show also established back in that 605 episode. I just wish that ending had a bit more thought put into it. Would their new vampiric states keep them from saving people? Would this state, make them kind of nihilistic and they just went on a general kill everything spree, monsters and innocents alike? We could assume that maybe there was a scene earlier where Bobby and Jody tried to talk them down, only to have things end up as we saw them, but I'm disappointed we never got to see that. The next storyline involves Dean and Castiel going on a jaunt through Purgatory. As this part of the episode went on, I started to wonder if it had been written by a certain duo that is infamous among the fandom. Imagine my shock when I checked the credits to see that no, this was written by one of our normally solid writers. And how angry can I be at him? This is why I'm always going on about continuity, people. Especially important when you're working on a collaborative effort, because what you break may not seem like a big deal at the time, but then a few episodes or even years down the road, someone else has to deal with what you broke. And yeah, I'm annoyed that basically Purgatory is broken now. This episode is dangerously close to Season 8's Taxi Driver, though still not as bad as that one. So the guys have 12 hours, and they're just wandering around Purgatory, when finally at some point, they set a trap for a Leviathan to charge them, which Castiel then just whoosh, throws away and totally kicks his ass. And how? How does that happen? Need I remind you that one Leviathan was easily able to defeat 2 angels on his own back in episode 721, Reading is Fundamental. And we've established that Castiel, his power is weakening this season, meaning this whole deal just extremely unlikely. They outright said Leviathan trumps Angel. How does Castiel's weakened power work that way? They interrogate him and find out the truth about the Leviathan blossoms themselves. The blossoms grow when a Leviathan is killed in Purgatory and the body rots. Okay, well, the first problem is we've never really seen evidence that a Leviathan can die. Remember, the only one ever actually killed in the show was Dick Roman in Season 7's final episode. Otherwise, Leviathan were never killed. They were only incapacitated, with their head one place and their body somewhere else. I mean, in the episode where Bobby learns that Borax can kill them, the head that he cut off before crawls back onto the body. So, how exactly does a Leviathan die in Purgatory? Are there a lot of bones of the saints left around? I mean, there's also the question of how are there any Leviathans in Purgatory? Wasn't it kind of implied that Castiel took all of them with him when he absorbed the souls in his place? Maybe he missed a few dozens, but... And then we see at the place, how do Leviathan leave skeletons? We were shown that their true form is of black goo. Goo does not leave skeletons. And then, how do other monsters leave corpses in Purgatory? Souls leaving corpses in an afterlife. How does that even work? Well, given that the doorway to the place was, that little squiggly line left open for 12 hours, I am kind of wondering if any Leviathan or maybe Eve herself bothered escaping from Purgatory while the guys were off wandering around. It was also pretty disappointing to have Castiel's struggle and all occurred off screen. But I will allow that maybe in a future episode they'll reveal that, hey, there's some friends hitching a ride inside of him again. The scene with Dean in the forest, it was fine. It reminded me of his soliloquy in episode 220, What Is and What Should Never Be, but not quite as good. I would have liked to have had him wake up and spend several hours searching and looking around Purgatory and have him slowly grow desperate and scared as he has trouble finding Castiel before he does. And then after that, the moment where he thinks he lost him gives him a moment of reflection, and then while they're sitting there preparing the spell for trapping Chuck, Dean does his apology and confession to Cass. I mean, especially when Cass talks about that he's going to take the mark of Cain, that it just really seemed like a missed opportunity for character catharsis there. I especially kind of wish Dean had spent several hours searching the woods rather than 10 hours unconscious as the ground, as that's a sign of pretty severe head trauma. How does that mark work anymore? I always assumed that it was the darkness trapped by the mark, not necessarily the mark itself, that changed people. Since it's like a keyhole into the prison, the darkness was maybe just seeping out little by little and corrupting folks. But then in episode 1122, we have the line, Chuck to Lucifer, that the mark didn't change you, it just made you more of what you already were. Which makes it sound like it wasn't exactly the mark that corrupted Lucifer. But if Chuck gets trapped, the mark will drive Cass crazy within a year. This whole thing's like Schrodinger's plot device. It basically does whatever you want it to. After Cass and Dean prepare the ingredients, they rush off to go help Sam and confront Chuck. The whole sequence where Dean just sitting there slugging him, that kind of got a laugh out of me. I wasn't thrilled with Chuck slapping him back. I kind of just wanted him to, do like one finger and beep. Just a light touch sends Dean flying to convey how strong, he's God. And the whole thing's going off when Sam screws up the plan. So basically, the prediction I made all the way back in episode 1507, those have a certain pattern to them. They'll give the boys just a bit of hope before dashing it. Was true. I was just off an episode. Here's something I don't understand. Chuck reveals to Sam that Chuck, is holding back the monsters. He maybe doesn't take an active role in things that go on in the world, but he does weigh down the scales. He loads the dice in humanity's favor. If he goes and gets locked up, well, then that's no longer the case, and things steadily go downhill into a bleak future. Okay, I'm fine with that thought. The closing shot of the episode seems to set up Jack to be that new influencer for good once Chuck is out of the game. No one's really surprised by this. My question is, why not Amara? I thought the entire ending to season 11, and even her appearance in this season, was to convey that she wasn't really evil despite being called the Darkness, mostly just misunderstood. So why can't she take over keeping things running while Chuck has a timeout? She's supposed to be a good, decent person, right? Shouldn't she be willing to do this? A lot of conflict of this season is built around the idea of the characters complaining that Chuck wasn't doing more. Well, if that makes him a villain, then what does it make Amara that she won't even do the bare minimum subtle maintenance that Chuck does? At the very least, this all implies that she's kind of a bitch. There's a lot to like in this episode. I'm always a big believer that you should try and show the audience the consequences of the heroes losing rather than tell it or imply it. One of the things that made season 5 of this show work so well was the episode The End, where we'd see the consequences of Sam giving in and Dean not fighting him. So I definitely think we need this episode. We need to see what happens without a Chuck. And I certainly have a soft spot for Leviathan. I didn't always agree with their execution, but I love their idea, if not always their presentation. So it was kind of neat to see them again. But there's still just so much to this episode that breaks previous canon and starts making the logic wonky, especially within the show itself. For example, after Sam loses hope and Chuck heals the wound, he heads out and vanishes. So, question is, why bother? Certainly his farewell message implies that he's not really going to bother with manipulating the Winchesters anymore, that they are probably going to be on their own without him. Why do we need to do anything? How exactly is Chuck a positive influence on the world when in a previous episode we saw dozens of bodies around that, I don't know, I guess he killed off because he wanted to? Again, the show really wants to make him a bad guy, and then besides fighting against all the previous seasons and canon, it keeps undercutting itself. It's just a real question of, why do we even need to beat him? He's gone off, apparently to do his own thing elsewhere, so just let it be. Don't bother with him. Let him go have his own thing. Let chill on the beach and drink margaritas. Why is Death, and probably Mr. Goo, so invested with doing something about Chuck and setting Jack up to be his replacement? This whole season arc feels like a solution in search of a problem. Oh, we're going to fight God no matter how little sense it makes. And this episode didn't really encourage that. It's really about a 2-shell rating. A minor tweak here or there, this becomes 3 shells easy. But again, Season 15 keeps being hindered by its own poorly chosen goal. We'll see what the next episode brings.